Jason Bergeson.
Good morning, Birmingham. It's nice to be back. So happy to see everybody here. As I understand it, we have well over 700 people attending our 43rd annual conference on neighborhood concerns. I want to thank Mayor Woodfin and the staff that have helped from the host city to coordinate this event. We're going to have a great week. We have over 50 workshops, we have community tours, and we have a lot of more activities to keep us busy. I want to take a second and recognize some of our group from NUSA. We have a 21-member board, and I'd like to take a minute to recognize each of them by name and ask them to stand. Hal Barnes from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Myself, Jason Bergeson from Anchorage, Alaska. Monique Coleman from Lubbock, Texas. Burl McCadden Pritko from Gardena, California. One from your hometown, George Lee, Jr. Deanna O'Malley isn't able to be here with us, but she's from Texarkana. We have Sandy Becker from Little Rock, Arkansas. Catherine Huckabee from the small state of Texas. Orlando Robinson, also a local boy from Midfield. Wanda Sloan from Hillsborough County, Florida, is not able to be with us today. We have Paul Gamble from Erie, Pennsylvania. Elton Gatewood, former president from Fircrest, Washington. Greg Jones, also from Birmingham. Ian Randolph from Memphis, Tennessee. Anne Marie Taylor from Indianapolis, Indiana. Lisa Middleton, who will be our host next year, from Palm Springs, California. Charmaine Clark from Columbia, South Carolina. Loretta Buckner from Wichita, Kansas. Renee Kane from Eugene, Oregon. And last but not least, our Public Affairs Coordinator, Annie Rogers from North Adams, Massachusetts. One really important person that's not on our board is Jerry Pryor. I think she's still manning the registration table. And one person that I want to take a moment for all of us to recognize that can't be with us this year is our former board member, Jerry Caligari, from Long Beach, California, that we lost shortly after last year's conference. Another important item coming up later in the conference, tomorrow in particular, is the election of new board members. So I'd like the 8 candidates that we have running for the board to also stand up as I recognize you. And I encourage the audience, the membership, to reach out and network with these candidates, get to know them. There's so many activities going on this week, we really didn't have a slot to give you the time to get to know them. So identify them, track them down, and learn more. First of our candidates is Hal Barnes from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Loretta Buckner from Wichita, Kansas. Sonia Buckner-Marion from Indianapolis, Indiana. Monique Coleman from Lubbock, Texas. Elton Gatewood from Furcrest, Washington. Precious McKesson from Omaha. Dwight Pridgeon from Little Rock, Arkansas. And a second candidate from Indianapolis, Indiana, Reba Taylor Hill. NUSA is an organization made up of volunteers, but we can't do it all without support from our cities, our corporate sponsors, and our affiliates. I don't have time to list everybody, but I would like to take a chance for each of those groups to stand individually. So if our city and county members could stand and be recognized. And now for our corporate members and sponsors. They're the ones that help put food on the table for all of us. And finally, the affiliate members. Hopefully you all know who you are. Affiliate members don't necessarily have a city to support them, but are of the same mind and share the same principles that the NUSA organization pursues. That's the main list for me. I'm sure everybody wants to move forward and listen to our wonderful roundtable discussion with 3 mayors from the area. So I will step down, let you enjoy your breakfast, and let our mayors get seated. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage co-founder of Inhabit Birmingham and associate professor of management at the UAB Collat School of Business, Dr. Anthony Hood.
Good morning. How are y'all doing? I want to welcome you guys to my city, Birmingham, Alabama. I'm a son of Birmingham. Hopefully you guys went on some pre-conference tours yesterday. By show of hands, how many of you went to pre-conference tours yesterday? Awesome. How many of you went to the white party last night? Oh, okay. Well, bless y'all for getting up early this morning. So I am here really to kind of kick off our moderated panel today. As it was mentioned, I am the co-creator of Inhabit Birmingham, an initiative that really trying to drive more people to move into some of our inner city communities. But I'm taking a lot of cues right now as far as how do you mobilize people. And so I'm excited to introduce our moderator of our mayoral panel, Ms. DeWanna Thompson. DeWanna Thompson is a really good friend of mine. How many of you paid attention to what happened in our our Senate race for Alabama? How many of you paid attention to that? Well, I tell you this, none of that would have been possible without the work of DeWanna Thompson. She's a partner in an organization called Think Rubrics, which develops communication, outreach, and turnout strategies. And particularly, she has a campaign called Woke Vote. And that Woke Vote campaign really made an impact on that race, making 100,000 contacts with people all over Alabama, and particularly turning out young black millennials. And so what she's done, she's mobilized, activated, and engaged a population that's going to have an impact on not only this state, but this country to come. But guess what? DeWanna Thompson got her start doing the same work that you guys are doing neighborhood work. She worked for our local city council. She developed community outreach strategies for our 99 neighborhood associations. So that is her foundation upon which all the other things that she's done in her career is based upon. Prior to Think Rubrics, she served as the National Deputy Director and Community Engagement Director for the Democratic National Committee. She's served on both of President Obama's presidential campaigns. She's worked with Senator Cory Booker on his Senate campaign. I mean, she is the real deal. So I am excited to welcome my friend, Birmingham native, and probably most importantly, my high school classmate, Ms. DeWanna Thompson. Come on now, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Hey, how is everybody doing? Oh, I know you can do better than that. You are come from all over the country to be in Birmingham, Alabama today. How is everybody doing? Awesome. It is my honor and privilege to be with you this morning. This really does my heart good when we get a chance to organize ourselves as community and neighborhood leaders and really talk about the things that are going to affect our community members and for change. We know that we are here today because we are talking about the rebirth, how we're going to recreate and revitalize our neighborhoods. And we're talking about how the new leaders of our cities are re-energizing and rebuilding these neighborhoods for success. With that, the late, great Sam Cooke once said in a beautiful song that a change is gonna come. Well, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, a change has arrived, and it is definitely in effect, particularly in the South. I am very proud to stand before you as your moderator for this mayoral panel of new leaders working to reignite, re-engage, reimagine, recreate, and revitalize our communities to bring about change. Would you please help me in welcoming Mayor LaToya Cantrell? She is getting involved and making a difference. That has been at the heart of what she does. It can be seen in what she does in her community and as an elected official. She has pledged to produce results for all the residents of her city. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for New Orleans' very first female mayor, Mayor LaToya Cantrell. This is an honor for me. He believes in his hometown and its citizens. His theme is putting people first and focusing on building communities through servant leadership. He is doing this by putting measures in place to fight crime, remove blight, and improve the city's 99 neighborhoods. Ladies and gentlemen, can you feel the magic? Let's show some love for the mayor of the Magic City, Birmingham's very own Mayor Randall Woodfin. And finally, he believes in his hometown. Throughout his life and career, he has maintained a consistent presence in community projects and displayed a genuine commitment to justice. He launched his very own firm, a firm dedicated to community and invested in justice. Everyone, please welcome the Mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, the Honorable Chokwe Lumumba. Now, as you can imagine, with such powerhouses on this stage today, we could get through a lot of things, but we only have a few moments together this morning. So we took some questions from the neighborhood board, nationally and locally, and we're going to pose those to our mayors today. I'm gonna sit with them so that we can have more of a conversational feel, and we're gonna jump right into this. Remembering that the theme of our panel is rebirth, recreate, and revitalize. Mayors, each of you ran on a platform which is centered around the need to revitalize and reimagine our neighborhoods. If you would, in your own words, can you please explain exactly what that means to you and why you felt it paramount? And since taking office, what has changed? And we'll start with you, Mayor Cantrell.
Okay, well, good morning again. Thank you so much. I would say what it means to me in running on that platform is having demonstrated a track record of meeting people where they are, understanding that the world's greatest experts on where they live are the people who live in neighborhoods, and working with them who can plan and chart their future. I did this particularly in the post-Katrina environment, led my community through recovery, And that just led me to the council, to the mayor's office. So things and programs that I was able to put in place at the ground level, I'm now able to scale up as mayor. So whether that's blight eradication, whether that is looking at creating educational corridors, breaking silos down. But at the end of the day, people are the world's greatest experts, and we as elected leadership have to meet them where they are and determine their course based by what they say.
That's awesome. Awesome. Mayor Woodfin.
Good morning, everyone. Listen, first, let me start by saying welcome to the city of Birmingham. We're glad to host Neighborhood USA, the NUSA conference, and to Mayor Cantrell, as well as Mayor Lumumba. Thank you all for being here as well. I ran on a simple theme of we deserve better. And I want to tell you what that means. I believe the city of Birmingham is only strong as its lowest quality of life neighborhood. My city is a city made up of 23 communities and 99 neighborhoods. And so as a candidate, I made a simple assessment by walking the streets of the city, getting a pulse of what was going on, not just what I saw visibly, but talking to residents, and more importantly, listening to residents. And the residents responded with the election of putting me in office because not only did we deserve better, but they wanted a mayor to move with a sense of urgency of investing in the entire city, not just one portion of the city. And so to that point, when I think of our 99 neighborhoods, there's probably nothing more important than the volunteer level of neighborhood officers who understand what's going on their block, in their street, in their neighborhood. And I think as mayor, I have to be at the ground level helping to improve people's quality of life.
Thank you so much. Mayor Lumumba.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? First and foremost, let me start by thanking Mayor Woodfin for having us both here, and always a pleasure to share the stage with you as well. First and foremost, this idea of how we look at and focus at neighborhoods is connected to the principles that guide me. I believe in the principles of self-determination, and I believe in the idea of collective genius. As Mayor Cantrell spoke of, she spoke of the idea of people being experts. Mayor Cantrell, being an attorney like myself, understands we often, can you hear me? I think I'm having a little malfunction. We often listen to, can you hear me?
No.
Do we have a mic? We often listen to expert opinions, and people may or may not be experts in the field may or may not be experts in the field of infrastructure or economic development or crime, but people are all experts in their condition. They know what has been difficult, and they know what has made life easy over time, and so we need to incorporate their collective genius, understanding that having wonderful mayors like the individuals next to me, that none of us have the answers to all of the questions by ourselves. And so we have to dig deep and listen to people and incorporate people's experiences in that process. I am the son of two activists. And so much of my life was in community organizations and doing organizing over issues of crime, issues of school justice, and so what we learned over time is that we had to meet people where they are, and that there were limitations in just having that community center, that everybody wasn't going to come to that community center. So how do we meet people and start talking about the issues that you're facing in your communities so that we can broaden the conversation to other issues that truly are at the root that leads to all those other issues being the result following behind that?
Awesome. Thank you so much. I feel like we're in great hands this morning. You feel that way? I'm going to jump right in because I'm of the school of let's get right to it. When we talk about our neighborhoods, one of the things I know for sure is that we're always thinking about what resources are going to be available for us to do the kind of programming that we care about in our neighborhoods. So I'm going to ask you, starting with you, Mayor Woodfin, how does your current or proposed budget reflect your commitment to strengthening and revitalizing neighborhoods?
So one of the number one thing I heard when I was a candidate, and I wasn't a candidate not too long ago. I haven't been in office 6 months yet. But one of the things I heard on repeat was, I am tired of the dilapidated structure to the left of me. I'm tired of the overgrown lot to the right of me, over and over again in the majority of the neighborhoods. So one of the things we wanted to do is be aggressive in blight removal as well as cleaning up empty lots. And so we put more money into weed abatement as well as demolition. But I think the other thing we did was take a real look at how we engage economic development. And so our city, of course, again, 99 neighborhoods, we have over 20 commercial districts that are sitting in the middle of some of these neighborhoods. What we wanted to do is say, how are we allocating resources to support the growth of our small business districts within our city? And so we're happy to present that soon to the council, how that looks. Because in previous times, what we've done is just allocate economic development dollars to external organizations. But what I am looking for is not only accountability, but I'm also looking to reinvigorate these small commercial corridor districts where residents should have the opportunity to be able to walk to a cleaners or walk to get healthy food, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's an awesome thing, and I want to pivot to Mayor Cantrell because I know Mayor Woodfin just said he's been in office 6 months. Well, we have our newly 21-day in Mayor Cantrell, but I think it's important to note that when you come into this office, you come in serving already and being from that space. So can you answer that same question? How does, as you're thinking about your budget and you're proposing what that's going to look like, how is your commitment reflected to strengthening and revitalizing neighborhoods?
Sure. So a real focus in understanding the existing conditions in the city of New Orleans, particularly around youth and families that make up neighborhoods. Less than 1% of our budget is going towards health. I think public health, everything falls under public health in my mind. And less than 3% is going again towards youth and families. And so immediately for me in preparing for the upcoming budget is to redirect more resources to families. Because if we're going to strengthen neighborhoods, then of course that dollar has to be aligned with what we say. And we have to be big on walking the talk. So I've created an office, I'm doing by executive order, an office for youth and families, connecting and breaking down the silo with the health department, as well as tying in our recreation, our public libraries, thinking holistically about it. Now, coming to this job from the New Orleans City Council, where I served there for 6 months, 6 years, and dealing with the budget there, it's been more aligned with incentivizing development in the city. And so just yesterday, cutting a ribbon on a tech firm who's moved to New Orleans, creating right now 300 jobs, but up to 2,000 in the innovation and tech space. So leveraging both public-private dollars to infuse economic development. So it all goes hand in hand in my mind.
I think that's absolutely correct, and it helps to lead me into my next thing, Mayor Lumumba. A major concern in our American neighborhoods is access to quality jobs, right? And which provide a respectable living wage. Please share your best thoughts on how you're managing your economic development department in the city of Jackson and how your office is working to bring in quality job opportunities to your city. And please share how you're engaging these prominent entities to consider locating within Jackson.
Well, thank you very much. And we were joking in the back. You have Mayor Woodfin, who's been in office approximately 6 months, Mayor Cantrell with 21 days, and I've been in office for 10 months, and I'm the elder statesman up here. So what we're moving to and what we focus on in Jackson is what we call a dignity economy. Moving away from cycles of humiliation, cycles that lead people without the opportunities and the jobs to truly improve their condition. And so in focusing on that, we want to be, and we make certain that we emphasize that we're a business-friendly city. And that requires some level of incentivizing businesses that you want to come, but you have to make certain that you don't leverage away the things that truly create the space for people to get the employment that they need. But the other thing is, as we invite businesses and as we entice businesses to the city, we have to make certain that as these businesses come and make great wealth, that they invest back in our communities. And so that is one thing that we emphasize, making certain that they invest back and that they provide living wages to citizens to make certain that our communities grow and thrive. And then we step out of the box. We step out of the box, and it's not necessarily an original idea because it goes back to the history of people like Fannie Lou Hamer in Mississippi and that organized workers, black farmers, poor farmers. We look at cooperative business models. We look at business models where those businesses are owned and operated by the community that houses them and invest in them. Because what we've seen in Jackson are businesses that come and do very well and are very successful, but they're not invested in the city of Jackson. Right. And so Jackson is like many of our cities that has no problem with producing wealth. It has a problem maintaining wealth. And so we want to make certain that the businesses value us. Yeah. And if you demonstrate a willingness to fill the voids in your community, if you demonstrate that if a city like Jackson, which has about 178,000 people and has no movie theater, if you demonstrate that we're willing to build our own movie theater, we're willing to build for our own voids, then you leverage your position. And when people don't value you and don't value the investment, most people don't value what you're building until you build it yourself.
That's right. Yeah. I think someone said, if you build it, they will come, right? And I think that leads me to this, because when we're thinking about what keeps people, what retains them in their own neighborhood, it's a feeling of pride in knowing that someone cares just as much as I do about my street on every single level of government. And I think that, you know, a lot of families recently have been commenting about the lack of recreational facilities and after-school centers and places where our young people can actually imagine and dream in a safe space. So how is the work, and this is to you, Mayor Cantrell, how will your administration work with neighborhood leaders and community partners to address this critical need of safe spaces in places like recreational centers, particularly in some of our most marginalized parts of our community?
Sure. I think one of the benefits in this, particularly in this post-Katrina environment over the past 13 years, there has been a real infusion of resources that rebuilt recreation centers, over 16 pools, community centers, and the like. But what has become very clear is that the facility alone doesn't get you the type of programming and the interaction and builds community on its own. So we have to make sure that silos are broken down, that we don't create an environment and an infrastructure to where our residents feel like they have to pay to play. And so coming in this work is breaking down those silos, again, opening the doors, not limiting interaction with the public. And that's some of the things that I've found. But we're going to ensure silos go away. That's why the creation of an office for youth and families is so important to the city of New Orleans, because we will finally have a real focus on youth, on families, from seniors from 0, to 99, and leveraging those partnerships. And it's not about how much money you have to participate in a program. So coming to this work, having created the only education corridor that exists in the city of New Orleans, a community center that's running 50 programs a day, a community that's paying for a liaison to work with the community, this is what I was able to do at the grassroots level. So now it's about scaling up that work, because people, again, know what they want and need in their community and are definitely committed to providing that type of interaction, but given the opportunity and the chance. Open the doors, get the gatekeepers away, because gatekeepers are doing more determining about keeping the gate closed than making sure that gate is open.
Mayor Cantrell is in here preaching a word this morning to us. I think that leads a little bit to this idea that if neighborhood leaders understand what is necessary and critical to their communities, what are we doing to make sure that their voices are elevated as we think about the strategies, the budget, and the programming for our cities? So I'll pose this question to you, Mayor Woodfin, and it's a two-part question. We say that neighborhood leaders are our city's hidden heroes. So many times they are the glue that holds our community together. But can you share with me a favorite neighborhood leader and how that leader has impacted the work that you're doing and is impacting your strategy around revitalizing neighborhoods?
Well, that's easy. I may get beat up for this, but because I talk to a lot of neighborhood leaders, and I know and respect a lot of them and appreciate the work they do. But I have to acknowledge one. His name is Jimmy Coleman, and the reason it's so easy to say Jimmy Coleman is because he's the neighborhood president of the neighborhood I grew up in. So I spent the first 12 years of my life in a neighborhood called North Birmingham, which is a neighborhood on the north side of town. And I would define Jimmy as the mayor of North Birmingham, because not only does he genuinely care, not only does he have a genuine passion about the issues of that neighborhood, but he volunteers his time as a neighborhood officer to make sure that the voices of the residents don't go unheard, and that he's on the solutions end of solving problems for the residents within this one neighborhood. And so whether it's Jimmy Coleman or Miss Maisha Hutchinson over on the east side of town and the Oak Ridge neighborhood and so many other neighborhood officers, I even have neighborhood officers who were once foot soldiers. And if any in the room, they deserve a round of applause to be acknowledged based on what they've done. But you used the word unsung heroes as it relates to neighborhood officers. We're talking about people who put in a massive amount of sweat equity and don't get paid for it. We're talking about people who passion and love for their neighborhood is probably higher than the elected officials that represent them. And we're talking about people who only want to see the best. And so oftentimes, as elected officials, we only hear their complaints. We only hear their frustrations. We only hear their anger, which is warranted a lot of times. But we don't see the sweat equity they put in. We don't see that they're not using taxpayer dollars to buy those gloves for that cleanup day in the neighborhood. We don't see that they're helping some senior or paying some max bus for transportation for a high school student to get to school. We don't see that part. And so they are unsung heroes, and they should be not only acknowledged, but as elected officials, we should recommit ourselves to balance their sense of urgency of fixing issues in their neighborhood.
Mayor Lumumba, I want to go to you for that as well.
Well, first and foremost, let me start by saying that I'm not as bold as Mayor Woodfin to identify one person, all right? I'd imagine it's being recorded, so I love them all right? But I do want to speak to what we're trying to do in Jackson to make certain that we hear the voices of all of these leaders. And you know, one of my campaign slogan was, when I become mayor, you become mayor. And that was not just a slogan that was intended to make certain that the citizens of Jackson, that these neighborhood leaders keep me accountable, but was also to express that we have a shared responsibility in the direction that the city goes in. And so one of the things that we encourage and push is we have people's assemblies. And at these people's assemblies, we bring the hot issues of the day and understanding that 3 minutes on a microphone at city council does not make community participation. And so we actually get in these spaces and we put pieces of paper on the wall, and we go through these ideas and make sure that we're listening to people. And it's an ability to keep me honest, to make certain that we're not accepting anyone's agenda for our communities, anyone's agenda for our neighborhood, that we are creating the agenda for ourselves and drafting the leadership which represents our agenda, right? And so we're making certain that we do that, and then we're pushing the envelope as we look at funding, moving to a participatory budgeting model where the community can identify where they want to see the resources go in their community. So we move away from this model of finding value in what we're funding to a model of funding what we collectively value. All right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
I heard Mayor Woodfin talk about foot soldiers, and it harkened back to my thought process around the fact that each one of you in some way are the mayors of civil rights cities, places where tragedy has happened, but those cities found their way to triumph. And I think that as each one of your cities has an incredible legacy of activism and movements for justice, we're still sort of in the midst of some of that even today. And so my question to you is, in the midst of like Black Lives Matter and Dreamers and marriage equality and food deserts and all the things that we are seeing people on both sides of the line talk about values, how are you creating cities that ensure diversity and inclusion, and that there's a welcoming space for all? Because what we know are two things. One, to attract industry into spaces, particularly in the South. People want to know that when they come there, their people are going to be taken care of, that they're going to be able to have an experience. And we also know that people are really thinking about the safety of themselves and their families. Can they walk down the street without being sneered at or snatched at? Those kinds of things. So I want to start with you, Mayor Cantrell, in one of the most vibrant cities in our country, but also with the legacy of tragedy to triumph. What are you doing to ensure that the city is celebrating diversity and creating a welcoming and safe space for all?
Sure. Before getting elected mayor and serving in that space on the New Orleans City Council, I led the effort to make New Orleans a welcoming city. And not just by saying, oh, we're welcoming, but demonstrating that with some real results. Not having to do an all call when you get a resident who speaks Spanish. And literally that's what was going on. And so identifying all of the multilingual employees that we had in City Hall, creating an office for equity and inclusion, and being very intentional about how we connect with people. But then also in the transitioning space from council to mayor, I had a real focus on inclusive communities. So not just those who are different makeup in terms of cultural makeup, but looking at those who are reentering society, looking at our LGBT community, looking at those in terms of senior populations as well, those living with disabilities. So when you come to the city of New Orleans, when you come to City Hall, you can see yourselves in the people who are serving you. And so being very intentional again about making those connections, but employing people who are reentering society, making sure that we have a reflection of those who are living with disabilities working in city government. And so it begins to be more about demonstrating it in a real way to where people feel they are valued because they see themselves again in the people who serve them.
I want to pose that same question to you. Yes, we can clap for that. That's awesome. I want to pose that same question to you, Mayor Woodfin.
Well, I think for me, it's acknowledging that our city was the poster child for racial oppression, and at the exact same time, we became the cradle of the civil rights movement. I think there's something to be said with that. When I think of 2018, and when I think of what's going on in the nation, when I think of what's going on at 1600 Pennsylvania and DC, it seems that in our country, the city of Birmingham can represent with equal energy, resisting change and fighting for change at the exact same speed. And I think we're on the fighting for change side with our administration. One of the things Obama did before he left office was declare our civil rights district a national monument, et cetera. That allows us to invest right now $10 million into the A.G. Gaston Motel, which was the founding ground for fighting for equal and social justice. I think one of the things we also have to do, and I've already said this, and I think it's important for this audience to know, we're actually in our mayor's office creating the Office of Social Justice and Racial Equity. What that simply means is issues not only around equity, addressing poverty, but issues in the LGBTQ community as well as immigrant community. We're facing head-on environmental justice, sustainability, food deserts, and food apartheid. All these issues will be addressed in the Mayor's Office of Social Justice and Racial Equity. Before this before, in the next 2 weeks, we'll actually hire, for the first time in the city's history, a LGBTQ liaison who will be housed in the mayor's office. That's important. But as we stand up this Office of Social Justice and Racial Equity, it is really easy for me to narrow scope and only focus on infrastructure, neighborhood revitalization, and paving streets, and fighting crime and education. But what's going on in state capitals across the country, what's going on in DC, I think it's incumbent upon us as mayors to really be in the space of fighting for real social justice and change.
That's awesome. Mayor Lumumba, could you also speak to that?
Yes. First and foremost, I think we can agree that our histories, the histories of our cities, are very difficult when we think about where they have been in terms of racial justice and equity. And you know, I think Nina Simone said it best when she said, "Mississippi, God darn," right? Because we know that Mississippi has such a difficult history. And one thing that we've done is I've taken what was a critique of myself and a critique of my father, where the suggestion was that we were maybe just too radical to bring people together. And we looked at that word radical and determined what a radical is. A radical is a person who seeks change. And if you look at the conditions of your neighborhoods, if you look at the conditions of your community and you see a need for change, then the reality is that we need to be as radical as the circumstances dictate we should be. When we look at those individuals who have made such significant contributions to our world and the change of our world, those individuals were radical. When we look at Martin Luther King, when we look at Medgar Evers, when we look at Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells, when we look at Jesus Christ, they were radicals, right? And so we have to dare to be radical. And so I challenge our city. I've made the challenge that Jackson is going to be the most radical city on the planet, right? And I believe in that. And we're pushing for that because when we look at a world where there's a lack of integrity everywhere we look, we have to find that integrity in ourselves and begin to change the world from right where we're standing. Yeah.
I love this notion of radical leadership, radical justice, radical love, and it leads me to the question around the rise in gun violence in our communities, bodily harm to each other, domestic abuse that's on the rise, child suicide that's on the rise. And I know that a lot of our communities are trying to figure out a way to stand up and create space in that regard. And I do think that it's going to take something radical, not just to change our condition, but the hearts of man, right? We know that there's a lot of work that we can do to try to legislate, but how do you legislate whether someone cares for someone enough to value their life? What we do know, though, is that as mayors and leaders of our community, we have a responsibility to create programs and systems and work together to address as best we can the critical conditions around gun violence and what leads to that. So I want to start with you, Mayor Cantrell, and I want to ask you, what are your thoughts around addressing violence, gun violence, and public safety concerns throughout the New Orleans community? And specifically, what are traditional and non-traditional strategies that you are planning to implement? I'm going to pose that to all three because I know that that is a critical thing that came up across our country in our neighborhood process. And so I want to start, and I want to just reiterate, what are you doing or thinking about, and how are you engaging your neighborhood leaders around how we address gun violence and public safety concerns, and what are those strategies, both traditional and non-traditional, that you're thinking about implementing?
Sure. You know, when I think about, you say traditional and non-traditional, but still going back to the neighborhood fabric. And when you're in a community that is not invested in, blight, overgrown vacant lots, a disconnect from recreation, even though you may have a new facility in your community. It really goes back to on that ground, touching people, listening to them, and investing in them. And programs are great, but it's not about the number, meaning how many people participated or for you to demonstrate by the numbers. But it has to be in how we have invested in people to bring about the changes that they really want to see. And that's why public health is so important. The mental health piece is very critical. And in New Orleans, particularly in this post-Katrina environment, all of the resources that were tied to mental health have disappeared. And our people are suffering. And we talk about gun violence, it's again, in those communities, in those families, in those homes where domestic violence truly is on a rise. And it is connected to the economics as well. People are under a lot of stress and being able to balance that. But for me, the focus will be not so much on the legislation, because legislation is there, but we have to demonstrate that we care about people and meeting them, but hand-holding where it's necessary. And just saying, directing them to a program, again, is not good enough. Now, as mayor, I am responsible for a juvenile jail. It's called the Youth Study Center. And the name does not reflect what's going on. That's just, let's be honest, I'm being honest with you. But knowing that there's no chief of police, there's no sheriff, there's the mayor, I'm taking a direct approach there and being on the ground with those young people, 10 years old, 11 years old, and crime in the city is up in the area of juvenile. But when I go there and I walk in and I see 10 a.m., they're in their cell, lights off. What's going on with that? So, and then once they leave, we're not following them with a continuum of care. So these are things that have to be done if we're truly going to change what's happening in our communities, but how families are truly living.
Yes. Mayor Lumumba, I would like to pivot to you as well, and we're getting close to our time here, so I do want to make sure that we have time for Mayor Woodfin and some closing remarks.
So you're saying I have about 30 minutes?
Right.
All right.
30 Holy Ghost seconds.
So first and foremost, I thank you for this question, because this is an issue that in recent weeks has really hit home in Jackson. And what we have to understand is that, you know, we have to be tough on crime, but we have to be intelligent as it comes to crime. And we have to understand that our officers, they need the resources to do their jobs, but you cannot out-police crime. When you look at our country, we have more police officers than any other country in the world. We have more people incarcerated than any other country in the world. Yet we have more crime than any other country in the world. And so we have to connect this idea of how we become intelligent and realize that the opportunity that you extend to people is strongly connected. Crime isn't unique to Birmingham. Crime isn't unique to New Orleans or Jackson or populations that's demographics reflect our demographics of our cities. Wherever you have high poverty, you have high crime. And so it's about increasing opportunity, and then it's about understanding that we have to engage young people. Wherever, you know, it's a lot easier telling a young person what to do than what not to do, right? And so we have to make certain that we're focusing on that and focusing on the why and not just the what, right? The why are we headed down this direction? Why do these young people feel that they don't have the opportunities? And so what we're focusing on is training for the community. We have violence interruption training that we are infusing into our community. We have credible messenger training that we're having individuals who have found themselves on the less desirable track of the law to speak to these young people who can speak through a lens of understanding of the things that they are experiencing. As a young mayor, there is a certain ability that I may have to connect to young people, but I have to recognize that my experiences, what I've benefited from, is not the same as what many of these young people are going through, right? And so we have to start supporting this type of training. We have to start hiring people in order to do this work because they have an ability for young people to follow them in every block. Every block is going to be organized by somebody. It'll be organized either by a positive force or a negative force, and we have to make the decision that we're going to start controlling our blocks.
I love that. I love that. One of my favorite activists, community activists in Oakland, California, he said, nothing stops a bullet like a job. Nothing stops a bullet like a job. He took it from you? Yeah. And so I want to give our Mayor Woodfin an opportunity to speak to that, and then we'll close right after.
And so, if I'm honest, one of the few things that keep me up at night is the gun violence in my city. I struggle with the number of murders that have taken place since I've been mayor. But I don't only have a crime problem, I have a poverty problem in my city. And it's not just poverty, it's concentrated poverty. And concentrated poverty is going to produce things that don't work for any of our communities. It's going to produce things that don't work for any of our neighborhoods. One of those things is young people making choices that don't necessarily work out for them. It also increases this whole notion of a reckless disregard for another person's life. And so there are many things we got to do in traditional and non-traditional way. And I can go back and forth, traditional, non-traditional. If I go the non-traditional way, she is right. Nothing stops a bullet like a job. And I've challenged that notion by publicly saying, if you bring me your guns, I will find a way to get you a job. And I mean that. That's not a program. It's not politics. It's not a program. It's direct. That I'm young enough to attempt to want to connect to young people who are in the element of committing crime. But the other traditional ways is we have officers that I am saying, because of the high crime we have in our city, I don't want anybody behind the desk. I need you out there, whether it's foot patrol, bike patrol, car patrol, to engage residents, not necessarily attempting only to suppress crime, but engage people and build relationships with residents in the neighborhood so there's trust and relationships. And then I think what we have to do is say, what's the purpose of our recreational centers in our neighborhoods? Should they be safe havens? If they can't, if home is not safe, if school is not safe, if other areas in the community are not safe, then with city resources and our physical buildings, we should use them as safe spaces for our children. And then the last thing I would say, as mayor, if I don't invest in the human capital of our young people, then we're missing the boat. And so if I want to decrease crime, we have to have a full commitment towards human capital, workforce development, and workforce training to make sure if children aren't going into the military, not going to college, then we can arm them with the skill set so they don't have to pick up a gun, they can pick up a job.
Will you help me to congratulate and memorialize the strength and the power and the wisdom that's on this panel by clapping for each one of these incredible mayors from our cities? We are, look at that, standing ovation. We are going to give Let me follow suit. We're going to give them each a quick 10 seconds to finish today. And I want to say it's been my honor and my privilege as someone who started at the City of Birmingham about 13 years ago, and my job was to coordinate and organize between our neighborhood leaders at the Citizens Advisory Board and our Birmingham City Council members. I know firsthand the work that you all do. It is an honor to serve you. It is an honor to serve on the ground with you, and it's an honor to serve each one of these mayors today, this morning. As you're wrapping up your thoughts, I want you to center it around what is it that is your favorite thing to do as mayor, and how does that show up? So with the last remarks, we will go with Mayor Cantrell, Mayor Lumumba, and then we will give you, Mayor Woodfin, the last remarks. Thank you.
Well, what I love to do is be on the ground with the people.
Yeah.
I mean, I came from community organizing, community development. It wasn't about wanting to be elected, it was about wanting to serve and get things done for people. So you'll find me in the neighborhood, whether it's the second line, eating some crawfish, you know, just with my people.
That's right.
You know, and building community and listening and loving on one another. That's what we have to do. So continue to do what you're doing in your neighborhoods, stand up for your folks, make it easy for government to help you, and that means knowing what you want and what you need where you live. So continue to be strong.
Mayor Lumumba.
I just want to take the opportunity to once again thank you just for the invitation and this great conversation and to share the stage with individuals that I respect so much. You know, I truly enjoy people as well. My father used to have a saying that if you don't love the people, sooner or later you'll betray the people, right? And so I love people and I love that interaction. And so that gives me life. And so, you know, I'm truly blessed to be in this position.
That's right.
And I look forward to learning and growing even more. And then, you know, I want to emphasize, you know, a point by sharing a lesson that my father was so honest with himself to speak to. I spoke earlier about my parents being activists, and my father talked about what he learned from my mother. My father was this great community activist, and he really, in his earlier years, didn't spend as much time focused on family. And from my mother, he learned that you can't be a community activist if you're not focused on family, because the family is the central processing unit of the community, right? And in like order, we can't truly love our cities if we don't focus on the central processing unit of our cities, and that is our neighborhoods.
That's right.
And love our neighborhoods and support our neighborhoods. And so we have to truly love people, love the interaction, and fight for a better day. I'm thankful for my wife, who speaks about, she speaks so kindly of me. She says that I'm an inherent problem solver, right? But I'm always grateful for the people who are willing to infuse and interject so much wisdom in me to give me the opportunity to try to get this thing right.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And to our Mayor Woodfin.
And so if you're sitting in this room, I consider you part of the choir. You attend, if the church is big enough, you attend both services. You know what's happening. You know the program. You know the run of show. You know the issues. You're at the table. What I believe is that there are more solutions than there are problems. And oftentimes, it's easy for all of us to get caught up in the problem and forget, if you're sitting in this room, you've been armed and tasked with solving the problem at the level of in your block, on your street, in your neighborhood. And for that, I want to say thank you for your service. I would say my favorite part of my job is the things that are not on the schedule. And so if I can just pop up at a school and engage some young people, if I see some young people out at a rec center or just in the streets, that's my favorite part, to engage our youth, because I light up more than them when I can see that there is hope in our future and that young people, they really want to do well. They just need options. And I want to provide that as mayor. And then I'll close with this. The people in this room have asked us as mayors to serve them. And I think all of us in our southern cities are committed to that. But we believe in co-partnering with our neighborhood leaders and our neighborhood officers to make that happen too. And so in this forum, being a part of the choir, we got to get the people in the pews, the neighbors that don't show up to neighborhood meetings, the neighbors who are just wanting everything to be on the neighborhood leaders, more involved in this process. And I think there's an opportunity for all of us as newly elected mayors to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for this opportunity this morning. Please give them another round of applause. And at this time, we will conclude our panel. We hope that you've been energized this morning and you'll have a great rest of the conference. Amen? Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the NUSA president, Jason Bergerson.
A big thank you to Mayor Woodfin, Mayor Cantrell, and Mayor Lumumba from Jackson, New Orleans, and Birmingham. This is a wonderful exchange, a wonderful opportunity to show what elected officials can do for you when you provide information to them. There are somewhere backstage some items that we need to bring forward. These are gifts from the host city for our mayor guests. And for Dewana Thompson, our moderator. These are the leaders to emulate. Much less important announcements, but very critical to most of you. The exhibit hall is open at 9 o'clock. It's over on the other side. Look on page 39 in your program book for a list of the exhibitors. Please stop by and visit the exhibit hall. There's great information not only about this conference and the associates and partners that have helped put it together, but also information from Palm Springs for next year's conference and our own NUSA booth where you can get information about the organization. One item that came up during registration yesterday was we didn't have a complete set of booklets or itineraries that you signed up for. Those pieces of information are now available at the registration booths over in the exhibit hall. Other than that, I think it's time to release you and get ready for your first workshops. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
For all NUSA Youth Conference attendees, please follow the Youth Conference facilitators holding the blue Youth Conference signs at the rear and side of the room. Thank you for coming. Please enjoy your sessions.